I've literally not even taken off my shoes, but I was busting down my door to film this video. Today I want to talk about some books that are some of my favorites and I love them, and when I see them in a bookstore I have like a moment of connection with them across the store. I make eye contact and I'm like, ooh, love you, bitch. But I feel like I don't really talk about them all that much, so you wouldn't really look at it and associate it with me or like think that I would recommend it. I don't know if you're new here, you've never heard me talk about these, but I want to reiterate that like these are some oldies with some goodies. Maybe some of them aren't really even that old, but I may have talked about them like once or twice in a video and then never brought it up again. So this is my bringing them up again. I want you to know that I like these books. And I kind of pulled them off my shelf in the order of my shelf, so it goes from like YA to nonfiction. So I'm gonna reorder them a little bit. First, I'll talk about a book that maybe comes as a no-brainer because I feel like everyone loves this book, but I really haven't like staked my claim in this fandom really, which I don't think should be a thing. That's a separate discussion, but I really love Clockwork Angel. This trilogy of Cassandra Clare's is by far her best, and I really need to reread these just because the emotional depth of these characters, and by these characters I just mean Jem, I love them so much. The action in these books is so great, the character dynamics in these books are so great, and I've read like almost every Cassandra Clare book after this, but I still go back to this as like my OG favorite of hers. But I feel like it gets lost in a lot of the other books that I'm reading, and I never talk about wanting to reread this one, but it still holds like a really solid place in my heart. If you don't know, Clockwork Angel is one of Cassandra Clare's books in the Shadowhunter world. This one focuses on characters in the 1800s, I think like the Victorian era. I don't know what eras are, shoot me. But this follows a woman named Tessa who goes to the England branch of Shadowhunters. What's that called? The Institute. And there she meets a whole cast of characters who are Shadowhunters, and she's finding out that she is in this world, not necessarily as a Shadowhunter, but she has connections to, you know, demonicness and stuff. It's a trilogy and it follows this love triangle that is like my favorite love triangle in fiction. These characters make re-entrances in other Cassandra Clare books, and every time they do, it just like makes me melt because I love them so much. So I don't know why I just haven't gone back and reread the source material instead of just like obsessing over like one page of Chain of Gold having Jem in it. If you have not read any of Cassandra Clare's books and you don't know where to start, give this trilogy a whirl because it's literally where it all began. And I think it's her best work. Like, it's succinct enough to be a standalone read. You don't have to read all 30 of her novels to understand these. They feature the most cool characters, the coolest setting, and I love it. Like, I don't know if y'all know, but I love it. Another book I feel like seems like an obvious choice, but it gets lost in the wind. Furthermore, by Tata Mafi. As we all know, I'm a Shatter Me stan, which Miss Tata Mafi wrote. This came out right after Shatter Me, so I had built it up to be like, this is gonna be the next big thing. It's another Tata Mafi thing. Like, oh my god, it's gonna be so great. Then she announced there's gonna be more Shatter Me books. So I kind of switched focus from like furthermore middle grade yay to more Shatter Me content. So this unfairly got pushed to the background, and I don't think it deserves that because I thoroughly enjoyed Furthermore. Furthermore is a middle grade novel about this girl named Alice who has no color in her body, but she lives in this super colorful world, and like color creates magic, and so she feels really alienated. And her father goes missing, so she has to go through this really strange land called Furthermore in order to find him, and she is accompanied by a sidekick named Oliver. But this is just such a lovely middle grade book about like loving yourself and going on an adventure and like trusting friends. The audiobook is awesome. It's told by like a story time-esque narrator, and even like the tone of this narrator is very much like, let me tell you a tale. So it's very cozy. It has a nice moral. Like most of Tata Mafi's books, it doesn't have the most stellar world building, but it still grabs you in because the characters are so sweet. This book is witty and imaginative. It has a sequel spin-off that's called Witchwood that features these characters plus some new ones, and that one's also brilliantly written. So I still highly recommend picking these ones up. If Shatter Me wasn't your thing or you want more Tata Mafi, this is definitely worth your time, and I feel bad that it kind of got pushed to the background because more Shatter Me books came out. But hopefully this encourages you that it's still good. I didn't forget about it. The next book I have to talk about is a nonfiction book. This one is Hunger by Roxane Gay. It's a memoir about a plus-sized woman, and I could honestly reread this every day of my life. I love it so much, and I forget that I love it so much because it's on the bottom shelf of my bookshelf, hidden away in my other nonfiction books. But it's one of the best memoirs I've read. This was the first book that kind of opened my eyes to being like, I shouldn't hate myself because I'm fat. This is equal parts Roxanne talking about her experiences being fat versus like lessons about how society is unaccepting and the ways that like the world doesn't cater to fat people, which I'm not saying it should. Well, I am. I don't know. See, I need to reread it, but this is one of the books that validated me, I guess, as being like, instead of feeling self-conscious that you don't fit in this place, you should be questioning, why doesn't this place fit you? Like, why don't they be more accommodating rather than blaming it on yourself? And then it talks about like weight loss shows and how pressuring people to lose weight is more detrimental than just letting them exist and be confident. So there's just so many discussion topics in this that I really don't see from the angle of someone supporting fat people and being from that angle rather than just automatically vilifying anyone who's plus sized. So I was on the verge of tears the entire time I was reading this. I annotated it and I have so many pencil marks in here. So if you are plus sized or you aren't but you want to learn more about like what you can do to support people and like how you can fight back against institutionalized fat phobia, this is an awesome resource. It does not deserve to be on the bottom shelf of my bookshelf because it's stellar. The next book I have to talk about is Autobiography by Christina Lauren. So as we all know, I'm a Christina Lauren stan. I love their romance books. I've probably read most of them. I don't know if you can see them on my romance shelf. I love them. And so when I discovered they had this YA book, I immediately leapt on it. This is about a boy named Tanner who moves from really liberal, open California to a Mormon town in Utah. He had previously come out as bi in California, but now moving to Utah, he kind of has to go back in the closet to stay on the down low. And he's enrolled in this creative writing course that has a teaching assistant who he begins to get closer with, and it's this exploration of sexuality while you're also religious and being in a religious society that's not super accepting of it. And so it navigates like how these two boys are trying to develop a relationship, but it's strained by sort of the system that they're in. And I love this book. It had its equal parts of being like sweet and tender and heartfelt and coming of age, while also bringing up really relevant topics of how can one be comfortable participating in faith and being religious while also feeling same-sex attraction. I don't recall who, but either Christina or Lauren of this writing duo is bisexual, so I think it's own voices. But this book just flew by. I identified with it so much, and I think it's an awesome resource for anyone who's going through this. It's the only book I know of that really talks about sexuality and religion in, I think, a really respectful way. So I thought it was brilliant. I don't give it the praise it deserves as much as I talk about Christina Lauren's romance books. So here I am saying that if you haven't read Christina Lauren's YA but you love their romance, you should totally give this one a try. The next book I want to talk about is one that's gonna break my heart, but I gotta yell about it into the void. Sea Prayer by Holly Hosseiny. Let's talk. Holly Hosseiny is a famous writer for writing The Kite Runner, A Thousand Splendid Suns, a bunch of adult full-length novels, but this is actually like a picture book that's super tiny. And this talks about a father and a son who are refugees trying to flee to another country via boat ride. And it's literally like 20 pages long with illustrations and like little stanzas of writing. And when I think about the ending of this book, where I reread the last page, I get chills. This book is so succinct and so powerful, and every time that I think about it, it just like punches me in the gut. This is a book that you could read in 10 minutes. You could even go to a bookstore and just find it on the shelf and read it while standing there. And I highly recommend that you pick this up at any capacity, whether that's standing in the bookstore or ordering your own copy. I promise you it'll stick with you, but it's super short. And I really just needed to yell about this from the rooftops, even though it's kind of a smaller shout out than the rest of them. I don't talk about this one enough. I'm sure you've seen it around, but you have to give it a go. The next book I want to talk about is a book that I read so long ago, but it's still so dear to me, and I don't think you'd be able to guess it if you've just seen my videos in the past couple years, but I am a great Gatsby stan. This is a book that I really identify with because the whole trope of like longing for the past, like the more I get older, the more that becomes so relevant to me, like so much so that I could start crying right now. Like I feel a little bit emotional talking about it. So books that talk about the subject of like remorse about the past, Gordo, books that deal with remorse about the past or longing for things to be different or just like thinking about what could have been and you know, the whole like green light situation where he's like, he's just longing for the past, born back ceaselessly. It just stabs me in the gut, man. It's so close to home. And I love also the type of narration where it's like a passive narrator who's just witnessing all this drama around him that they've been dragged into. And I think this book honed that for me. I read this when I was a junior in high school, and these are so many different tropes and narration styles that I think I learned to love because of this book. And this book is just emotional for me. It's beautiful. I have a ton of sticky tabs. Like, I just adore this book. I know it's polarizing, but you can't take it away from me. It's still my fave. Another book I want to mention is The Sun and Her Flowers by Rupi Kaur. One of my most popular Goodreads reviews is for Milk and Honey, which I gave 2 stars and I was not a fan. But I really enjoyed this sophomore poetry collection by Rupi, and I don't really talk about it. Like, it came out when I was in college and I was like, it was great, I want my own copy. And then I got it and it sat on my shelf and I don't think I've touched it since then. But I thought this was a brilliant growth from her first book. The first book I feel like was just Tumblr quotes and had no depth, which, like, poetry is subjective, so I'm not attacking you if you loved it, but apparently that's very controversial for me to point out. I felt like this book did a complete 180, like Dua Lipa once said, did a full 180. I loved that this poetry book focused on intersectionality and, you know, giving brown girls confidence and recovering from trauma, and the feminism covered in this I felt went a lot deeper than it did in Milk and Honey, whereas Milk and Honey was like, you don't need a man. This one had a lot more nuance. The metaphors in this were great, and I just felt like it used a lot more of like traditional poetry style than necessarily Milk and Honey did, because Milk and Honey just felt like sentences, and this actually was flowing and gorgeous, and just such a step up for me. So I don't know, maybe cue the I Was Wrong song about Milk and Honey, but this one really redeemed Rupi Kaur for me. And if you didn't like Milk and Honey but you're considering reading this one, I say go for it. I think it is a massive improvement. And I need to go through this and annotate it because there are several poems in here that I remember just like highlighting everything when I first read it on script. So yay, Rupi! So this video was actually inspired by this next book. As happens about every 3 months, this tweet circulated book Twitter that like there are no sapphic books on book Twitter. So I pulled this book out of the archives and I was like, if you have not read this book, I will shout from the rooftops about it because you have to read it. It is the best. The Abyss Surrounds Us by Emily Skrutsky is my favorite sapphic fantasy book, whatever. It's so good. This is a sci-fi dystopian book about this girl who is a dragon slash sea creature slash monster trainer, and she gets abducted by a pirate ship because they want to use her to train these creatures to protect the pirate ship in this world that's been overrun by like melting water, so sea is the main way of navigation. And long story short, these 2 girls are stuck together on this ship as one of them is her protector slash, you know, keeping her in line, and this girl who's been abducted against her will to help them. So it's enemies to lovers, absolute goodness. And when I say enemies to lovers, I don't mean like they're a little bit annoyed with each other, then they fall in love. I mean like they are throwing punches, there are knives, like they are at each other's throats. It has the there's only one bed trope. It's so well written. I can see this as a TV series or like a movie franchise because the world is so inventive and I love these characters. This is a duology, so there's a second book. I have not read it yet. I'm a fake fan, but I just need you all to know that this book is the bee's knees, and I don't even like sci-fi, so I was really skeptical going into this because I was like, I'm not gonna like it, that I'm gonna feel bad that I'm rating another sapphic book a low rating. But I was wrong. You have to give this a shot. It is one of the most beautifully done enemies to lovers I've ever read. And that's that on what? That. The Friend Zone by Abby Jimenez. This is a adult romance book about this girl named Kristen who has, it's gonna bug me because I usually remember, but she has a fertility problem that's caused by like something with her ovaries. I'm so sorry, I'm pulling a blank, but either way, she has a lot of chronic pain because of this disease, and she's planning to have a hysterectomy to bring up her quality of life. And then she meets Josh, who is a firefighter, and he's so sweet and I love Josh so much. But he is a family man and he wants a ton of kids, and so when she meets him, she's kind of like, oh, I can't provide that. So she like wants to pursue something with him and she's so enamored by him, but sort of has to keep herself distance, the friend zone, which is a term I hate, but for these purposes, she wants to like be with him, but she can't be there emotionally for him or be there long term for him because she knows she's not gonna be able to provide him kids, which that synopsis can lean towards sounding very like patriarchy, like mother has to provide kids. Like, I don't want you to think it's gross or anything, because this is one of the most beautiful, raw, candid, like such intimate scenes between these characters. It's the best romance ever. It's actually really funny. It's really sweet. There's a lot of witty banter. This book will make you laugh, but then there's also that serious side to it where it'll also make you cry. And I think this is the most annotated romance book I have. Just the moments of pure joy and sadness and funny. Like, this book will bring you through every emotion on the scale. And then at the very end, just like leave you craving more. And this author does have another book coming out soon, so I'm so excited. This is this author's debut book, and it just blew me out of the water, just how deep it was, but also how meaningful the relationship was and how realistic Kristen was in dealing with everything. So if you have not read this book, I literally don't know what you're doing. This is just truly a superior book. Like, it's sweet and soft, but it also talks about like this woman who's in pain and the way that the love interest supports her and the way that they reconcile their differences and yada yada yada. I could go on about this for years and years. I just realized like every book I've talked about in this video, I'm just dying to reread the more that I hype it up. I'm like, I love that book so much. Why have I only read it once? Like I said, get on it. It's the best. In the past 6 or 7 years, I've read so many books, and I tend to only focus on talking about like the more recent ones I've read. So if you want like a ongoing series of books that I enjoyed but don't really have the reason to talk about anymore, I would love to film that for y'all. I guess while we're here, I'll discuss the 2 honorable mentions I didn't have time to talk about. They were going to be Summer of Salt by Katrina Leno, which is the best sad but cozy sapphic romance ever with a little bit of magic in it. And also Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. I read this one more recently, which is why I didn't make the cut, but this is historical fiction about a book lover, and this made me sob. It's beautiful. My kittens are pestering me because they want attention and snacks, so that is my calling to go. Let me know if you've read any of these books that I'm talking about, or if you have a well-loved book that you read a while ago or you don't talk enough about it. I would love to hear about it down below. See if it's on my TBR, see if it should be added to my TBR. Thank you for putting up with my overhead lighting rather than sunlight lighting. Shrimp says goodbye. Okay. Adios.